have 6 tips for you today for the Mavic 3 Pro to get the most out of it, better video quality and also a few more, and also a little bonus tip at the end. So let's start directly with the first tip, and that is to get the most dynamic range out of, or how to get the most dynamic range out of the Mavic 3 Pro. Also the Mavic 3 and 3 Classic, it's the same for all of them. And here the issue is that if you want to get the maximum dynamic range out of any camera in lock, you have to expose to the right, but the Mavic 3, like all Mavic 3s, make it very difficult, because when you have the view assist function on to see how the image would look around later, the histogram changes and you need the correct histogram to expose to the right. So you see that here right now I have the view assist on and the histogram is very contrasty, so it stretches over the whole histogram, and so to me it looks like I would overexpose if I would expose brighter now. But if I turn the view assist off, you see that the histogram is much smaller at the same exposure, and that means that I can actually expose a lot brighter so that I get more details into the shadows without actually overexposing the image. And that's why in high contrast situation where you want to capture a lot of dynamic range, shooting straight into a sunset or something like that, you want to make sure that you turn view assist off and then expose so bright that the histogram is completely to the right, because then you capture the maximum dynamic range of this camera. That's something that I should have known earlier, because there are some shots where some mountains in the foregrounds, etc., are way too dark. Yeah, didn't know that before. It's raining anyway, so let's directly talk about the next way to enhance the dynamic range on the Mavic 3 Pro, and that is with this filter here, which is a graduated filter. You might see that in the shot here right now. And that means that you have ND on top, but then there is a transition to no ND, so the top of the filter is darker than the bottom, and that is good if you have, for example, a sunset or a sunrise over a mountain and you want to show the mountain itself very detailed, but you also want to show the bright sky. Just the problem today here, it's cloudy, the dynamic range is already enough for today's conditions, so today I actually don't need those filters, but when I film a sunset again in the future, then I will definitely use them. I just got these filters, so I couldn't like really test them, but I used similar filters before on normal cameras, not on drones, so I know how they work and that they usually do a very good job. So it's a little recommendation here. They are from Freewell, come in a set. It's just, I think, a bit less than $50. So I think, considering that it enhances the dynamic range of your Mavic 3 Pro, it's actually a very good investment. Car is coming. Oh. You got pissed. Monsky, how is it? And my next tip is about sharpness on the Mavic 3 lineup. You probably know that you can change the aperture there. And now you usually change the aperture to control your exposure. Monsky is flying the R2S. But by changing the aperture, you also change the sharpness slightly of the lens. It's usually when you're at f2.8, then you have a bit less sharpness as in the middle, and then after f8, the sharpness decreases again a bit. So on most lenses, including the Mavic 3, the best sharpness is somewhere between f4 and f8, and that's why I usually try to keep my aperture setting at around f5.6. Of course, doesn't always fit. Sometimes you keep it at f4, sometimes f8, but I wouldn't really go to the extremes like f11 or f2.8 if you want to have the maximum sharpness. And talking about sharpness, of course, nothing is sharp when it's out of focus, which leads me to my next tip, which is when you want to get your usual landscape shots, like flying a bit farther away from everything, then always ensure that the focus icon is not on AF or MF, but on that mountain icon, because that means that everything is in focus. It's called infinity focus. Of course, after a certain focusing distance, which is why when you fly a bit closer to things, maybe you want to track yourself or so, then you should actually use AF or MF. But for your usual landscape shots, just keep it to that mountain icon, and that ensures that everything is always in focus. That's pretty strong. Legal cocaine. And my next tip for the Mavic 3 Pro, but all other Mavic 3 drones and also the Air 3, is that you should really play a lot around with those zoom lenses, both the 3x and 7x. I prefer the 3x most of the time because it has a bit better quality, but also the 7x zoom lens, sometimes especially in the mountain when something is really far away, that gives looks that you just can't get. And I actually had people asking me if that was shot on a drone, because it didn't look like a regular drone shot anymore because of that compression. And that's like important to think about. It's not just about being closer to a subject, it is about having that compression, especially if you fly sidewise or you circle around the subject. Then you get this parallax effect, and that always looks stunning. But that's not the only reason. The zoom lenses also allow you to get more shots. Like if you use your wide angle lens only, then you can only get maybe 4 angles or so in one position. But the moment you use your zoom lenses, you can pretty much get an infinite amount of shots because you're so zoomed in, and that makes playing around with those lenses actually very interesting. And I think that those lenses are still underrated. And also, if you don't have a Mavic 3 Pro or normal Mavic 3 or Air 3 yet, and you're thinking of getting one, and this is actually a good reason to get one. Like I personally would rather get an Air 3 right now than a Mavic 3 Classic, just because you have that 3x zoom lens. My next tip is not really about the quality of the Mavic 3 Pro, but more about how to get more shots out of it. And that is that you can also perfectly use this drone as a gimbal, the Mavic 3 Pro, also the Mavic 3 and also the Air 3, because you don't only have one focal length available anymore. Like having the 24mm look is oftentimes used on gimbals, but I personally find it very interesting to get a 70mm look as well when I shoot with gimbals, because especially if you're tracking shots from the side or so and having something in between, it can actually look really nice, really dynamic. So also play around with that, like especially if you travel around, you don't want to carry so much, so you don't necessarily have to bring a gimbal if you already have one of those drones, because you can get gimbal-like shots at 24mm and 70mm. Of course, there are also shots that you can't really get with those drones where you actually need a gimbal for, but these are usually not the shots that you want to get all the time. It's time to go back. You guys are waiting for me, but let me quickly give you my last tip, and that is that you should learn more about all the functionalities that the Mavic 3 Pro gives you to film yourself. So especially all those quick shots, etc., but also the tracking functionalities and also course luck, because I find myself oftentimes in those situations where I'm somewhere alone, but it's either not really possible to set up my tripod to film myself, or I want to have a bit of camera movement in there. So go a bit outside and train that, try all the quick shots, try the tracking, especially that POV is really nice, and also try out the course luck function. It's really nice to like have a flyby while you're in the shot, for example. You're subscribing right now. It's just camera tutorial. It's not interesting for everyone. Okay, we're driving back now. I think we're stopping somewhere for the next tip. It's actually quite nice. There's a waterfall on the way back. Going there now. By the way, we've been to Bang Bong Piang Rice Terrace before, which is like 2 hours away from Chiang Mai, close to Doi Internon.
Ah, fuck! Oh, was that you shouting?
Yeah.
Dude, man, fuck this shit!
You thought I fell down?
Yeah, he's like, he fell down. I was like, what the fuck was that? So the thing is, guys, I believe in ghosts. Like, I'm Buddhist, okay? So I believe in, like, spirits in the forest. So when I come in places like that, I'm not used to, look the fuck, I'm wearing a fucking Nike J's, bro! With proper, like, slacks and shirt. I wasn't prepared for this. You didn't tell me, and you didn't tell me that we're going hiking, bro. Now I'm stuck here.
It was longer than expected, but a majestic waterfall. I loved it. However, let's come to the last tip, which is generally about all drones that have bottom sensors. I've been recently in the north of Thailand here around and was flying in the morning, surrounded by fog, surrounded by clouds. Lots of nice shots, but I had the problem there that it was really hard to get the drone back out of the air, because when a drone is surrounded by fog or flies in the clouds, it thinks when you want to fly down that there's something below it and it goes into landing mode, but actually it looked like it didn't actually decrease its altitude, so it wasn't actually landing, it just stayed where it is in my case. So I really had to wait until the fog is gone to land the drone again. It was pretty scary. And that's where my tip comes into play. If you know that you go somewhere where you're surrounded by fog, or you deliberately want to fly in clouds, etc., then bring some tape for your drone, because you can tape the bottom sensors and then that vision system shuts completely off, which also makes flying a bit more dangerous. So be careful there. Make sure that despite the clouds or fog, you still have at least some vision to the drone, or you're at least sure by altitude that you fly above everything. Not that you crash into something or you cause any harm to anyone, but it makes bringing the drone down a lot easier because the bottom sensors are turned off then, so you can just fly down at any time. And by the way, where this trick also helps is if you want to do certain fly-throughs where the ground below the drone increases in height. For example, let's say you want to fly through a window, then the drone flies over the wall, and the bottom sensors then would usually think that the drone needs to go up to prevent a crash, but that of course causes the drone to crash in the top part. And that also happens when you fly in sports mode or you turn the safety system completely off because the bottom sensors still work. It actually happened to me like 2 years ago with the R2S. I wanted to fly through that bank and the ground increased a little bit in height. The drone got up and crashed right into the bank. Usually I would have made it. And then actually a few months or so later, I tried it again and I taped the bottom sensors. No problem. It just got through without any issues. That's why I would generally actually say have some tape in your bag. You never know what to use it for. Can sometimes help if you want to do stuff with your drone. But that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you want to see more like that and more tips about cameras, drones, and all of that stuff. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.